Welcome. Your opinion truly matters to us. At the end of the story, leave your comments. We read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's begin the story. The 42nd floor of Wellington Tower buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that only came when Marcus Wellington III was about to make one of his legendary grand announcements. Sarah Mitchell clutched her fifth coffee of the morning, a personal record even for a Tuesday, and tried to blend into the mahogany paneling of Conference Room A. She'd worked as Marcus's personal secretary for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that she was counting. Much. Each day had been a masterclass in enduring condescension, wrapped in expensive cologne and Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice carrying the particular brand of arrogance that only came with inherited wealth and a trust fund larger than most small countries' GDPs. "Today, we make history." Sarah suppressed an eye roll that could have powered a small wind turbine. Marcus made history approximately twice a week. Last month, it was revolutionizing the breakfast cereal industry by adding gold flakes to cornflakes. The month before that, he'd tried to trademark the color blue. The assembled crowd of Harvard MBAs, linguistic consultants, and one very expensive psychic, Marcus had a thing for unconventional advisors, leaned forward expectantly. Sarah remained strategically positioned near the coffee station, invisible as always. Marcus dramatically pulled a sheet off what appeared to be an ancient parchment displayed on an easel. The document looked like it had survived several wars, a flood, and possibly the Titanic. Its edges were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible in what Sarah immediately recognized as Cyrillic script mixed with Latin characters. "This," Marcus proclaimed, gesturing at the document like a game show host revealing the grand prize, "is the key to a fortune that will make our current holdings look like pocket change." Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the linguistics professor from Harvard, whom Marcus kept on retainer for situations exactly like this, adjusted her glasses nervously. "Mr. Wellington, as I've explained, this type of archaic Romanian mixed with Latin legal terminology requires someone with actual talent," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "which is why I've brought you all here today." Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. Romanian. Of all the languages in the world, it had to be Romanian. She set down her mug with hands that weren't quite steady. Marcus began pacing, his $1,000 shoes clicking against the polished marble floor like an expensive metronome. "This document came into my possession through, let's call them interesting circumstances. The previous owner, one Gheorghe Popescu, died mysteriously in Bucharest last year. Heart attack, they said, though I suspect he choked on his own ambition." A nervous chuckle rippled through the room. Sarah's grip tightened on her coffee mug. "Before his untimely demise, Mr. Popescu contacted my grandfather's estate, claiming a business relationship dating back to 1943. This document was found in his personal effects, along with a note stating that it held the key to wealth beyond imagination and was meant for the Wellington family." Marcus paused for dramatic effect, scanning the room like a predator surveying his domain. His steel-gray eyes swept past Sarah without acknowledgement, as they had for over 3 years. To him, she was furniture. Expensive furniture that typed and answered phones, but furniture nonetheless. "I've consulted with 12 translation agencies," Marcus continued, his voice rising with theatrical flair. "6 university professors, 3 government linguists. I even tried Google Translate, though I suspect Google's Romanian capabilities are about as reliable as their promise to not sell your data." More nervous laughter. Sarah found herself leaning forward despite herself. "The results have been inconsistent. Some claim it's about oil reserves in the Carpathian Mountains worth $500 million. Others suggest it's about gold deposits. One particularly creative translator insisted it was a recipe for immortality elixir." Dr. Hartwell cleared her throat delicately. "Mr. Wellington, as I've attempted to explain, the combination of archaic Romanian, Latin legal terminology, and what appears to be regional dialect makes this document exceptionally challenging. Challenging, Marcus repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. Dr. Hartwell, I didn't pay for your Harvard education to hear about challenges. I paid for results. Sarah winced. She'd watched Marcus treat people like disposable resources for years, but it never stopped making her stomach churn. So here's my proposition, Marcus announced, pulling out his phone and opening what appeared to be his banking app. I'm transferring $1 million into an escrow account right now. $1 million. The room fell dead silent, except for the sound of Marcus's manicured fingers tapping against his phone screen. Whoever can provide me with a complete, accurate translation of this document gets the money. Cash. Tax-free gift. No strings attached. He looked up from his phone with the smile of a shark who'd just spotted a particularly appetizing surfer. Considerate motivation. The assembled experts began murmuring among themselves, pulling out notebooks and digital recorders. Dr. Hartwell was already photographing the document with her phone. Marcus's gaze swept the room again, lingering on each potential translator with calculating interest. When his eyes reached Sarah, he paused, and his smile became particularly cruel. Of course, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I don't expect our support staff to participate. This requires actual intellectual capability, advanced degrees, years of specialized study. He chuckled. Not just the ability to fetch coffee and file papers. The room went quiet. Sarah felt every eye in the room turned toward her, some with pity, others with embarrassment for witnessing such casual cruelty. Dr. Hartwell looked genuinely appalled. Sarah's cheeks burned. 3 years. 3 years of, Sarah, get me coffee. Sarah, cancel my appointments. Sarah, do you think you could manage not to mess this up? 3 years of being treated like an invisible servant by a man who had inherited everything he had and earned nothing. What Marcus Wellington III didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn in 3 years of daily interaction, was that Sarah Mitchell had graduated magna cum laude from Columbia University with a master's degree in Eastern European languages and literature. Her thesis had been on the evolution of Romanian legal terminology from the medieval period through modern times. She spoke Romanian, Bulgarian, Hungarian, and enough Russian to get herself arrested in Moscow. She'd taken the job with Wellington Industries because she'd needed work immediately after graduation, and the pay was excellent. She'd stayed because, well, honestly, she wasn't sure anymore why she'd stayed. Mr. Wellington, Sarah said quietly, setting down her coffee mug with a small clink that somehow cut through the awkward silence. The room turned to stare at her as if furniture had suddenly learned to speak. Marcus looked genuinely surprised, his eyebrows rising nearly to his perfectly styled hairline. Sarah, please, he said with exaggerated patience. The adults are talking. Something inside Sarah snapped. Maybe it was the 3 years of accumulated condescension. Maybe it was the way he'd just humiliated her in front of a room full of strangers. Maybe it was simply that she was tired of being invisible. The adults, she repeated slowly, standing up and smoothing her sensible skirt, have apparently spent months failing to translate something that might take me about 10 minutes. The collective intake of breath was audible. Marcus's face went through several interesting color changes, settling on a shade of red that clashed terribly with his expensive tie. "Excuse me?" he sputtered. Sarah walked toward the document display with measured steps, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, could practically hear their thoughts. Who is this secretary? What is she doing? Is she having some kind of breakdown? She reached the easel and studied the document for exactly 37 seconds. The handwriting was archaic but clear enough. The combination of Romanian and Latin wasn't particularly complex if you understood the historical context. What she was looking at was fairly standard legal documentation from the 1940s. "This," she said, turning back to face the room, "is not about oil reserves." Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a confused fish. That's impossible. Multiple experts have confirmed. Multiple experts, Sarah interrupted, have been overthinking this. It's not a treasure map or a secret formula. It's a property deed. The room erupted in murmurs. Dr. Hartwell pushed closer to the document, squinting at the text. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm, his grip tight enough to leave marks. "You're lying," he whispered, his voice dangerous. Sarah looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "Remove your hand, Marcus. Now." Something in her tone made him release her immediately. Sarah had never used his first name before. Never looked at him with anything other than professional politeness. The woman standing before him now was a stranger wearing his secretary's face. "It's a deed to a vineyard in Brașov County, Romania," Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "Dated 1943, transferring ownership from one Gheorghe Popescu, presumably this man's grandfather or great-grandfather, to Marcus Wellington Thurthers. Your grandfather, I assume." Marcus stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "A vineyard?" "Approximately 50 hectares with a stone farmhouse and wine cellars. The document includes an inventory of wine stocks dating back to the 1920s. Sarah pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. "The property is described as being located on the hills overlooking Brașov, where the morning mist meets the ancient oaks." Dr. Hartwell was now photographing the document frantically, muttering in what sounded like rapid Romanian. Several other linguists had crowded around the display. "You can't possibly know all that from a 30-second glance," Marcus protested, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. Sarah held up her phone, showing him a completed translation she'd typed while talking. Complete translation, including footnotes explaining the historical context and legal implications. "The mysterious fortune your grandfather supposedly left you is a wine collection from the 1940s, potentially valuable to collectors, but we're talking maybe $50,000 total, not millions." Marcus snatched the phone from her hands, reading frantically. Dr. Hartwell peered over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she followed along. "My God," the professor whispered. "She's right. The syntactic structure, the legal terminology. This is absolutely correct." The room exploded into conversation. Marcus continued staring at Sarah's translation, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been respect. "How?" he asked finally. "Columbia University," Sarah replied calmly. "Master's degree in Eastern European languages and literature, magna cum laude. My thesis was on Romanian legal terminology evolution from medieval times to the present day." She paused, letting that sink in. "You never asked." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could practically hear the gears turning in everyone's heads. The secretary they'd all ignored, the invisible woman who brought coffee and filed papers, had just accomplished in minutes what teams of experts had failed to do in months. Marcus looked at the translation again, then at Sarah, then back at the translation. You have a master's degree from Columbia?" "2 master's degrees, actually. The second one is in international business. Also, magna cum laude." Sarah's smile was perfectly professional and absolutely deadly. "I mention it on my resume, the one you never read when HR hired me." Dr. Hartwell was openly gaping now. "Miss Mitchell, your translation is not only accurate, it's elegant. The way you've handled the archaic verb forms and the legal Latin interpolations is masterful." "Thank you, Dr. Hartwell. I've always admired your work on Balkan linguistic evolution." "You know my work?" The professor looked delighted. "Your paper on Serbian-Romanian legal terminology crossovers was brilliant. I cited it in my thesis." Marcus was looking back and forth between them like a spectator at the world's most academic tennis match. "This is impossible," he muttered. Sarah turned back to him, and her professional mask slipped just enough to show the steel underneath. "What's impossible, Marcus, is that you've employed someone for 3 years without bothering to learn a single thing about them, beyond their ability to fetch your coffee exactly how you like it. But you're my secretary. I'm your personal assistant with 2 advanced degrees who has been vastly overqualified for this position since day one. I stayed because the pay was excellent and I needed work experience. but apparently, I've been selling myself short." She extended her hand, palm up. "So, about that $1,000,000? Marcus stared at her outstretched hand as if it were a coiled snake. Around the room, phones were buzzing as people texted and called colleagues. The story of Wellington Industries' secretary humiliating her billionaire boss was going to be all over the business news by evening. "You can't be serious," Marcus said weakly. "Dead serious. You made a public offer. I accepted and delivered, in front of witnesses." Sarah gestured around the room. "Dr. Hartwell has confirmed the accuracy of my translation. Several other people have recorded this entire conversation. The money is sitting in escrow." Marcus looked around the room desperately, as if hoping someone would tell him this was all an elaborate prank. Instead, he found himself facing a room full of people who were looking at him with mixtures of amusement, pity, and professional interest. "But it's just a vineyard," he protested. "A vineyard your grandfather apparently owned and forgot about. The deed is legitimate, the property still exists. I found it on Google Earth while you were sputtering, and those wine cellars might actually be worth investigating. Some of those vintages could be quite valuable to collectors." Sarah picked up her coffee mug and took a sip, as if publicly destroying her boss's ego was just another Tuesday morning task. "Besides," she added with a smile that was pure professional courtesy, hiding a core of titanium, "you didn't specify what kind of fortune the document had to reveal. You just said, whoever could translate it gets $1,000,000. I translated it. Accurately, completely, in front of witnesses." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For possibly the first time in his privileged life, he had absolutely nothing to say. Dr. Hartwell cleared her throat. "Mr. Wellington, if I may, Miss Mitchell's translation is not only accurate, it's the most comprehensive interpretation of this document I've seen. The historical context she's provided, the legal implications she's outlined. This is doctoral-level work." "Doctoral level?" Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "I'm considering pursuing a PhD," Sarah said conversationally. "This translation would make an excellent case study for my dissertation proposal." The room had gone completely quiet except for the soft buzz of phones and the distant sound of New York traffic 42 floors below. Marcus stood frozen, still clutching Sarah's phone with her translation, looking like a man who just realized his entire worldview was fundamentally flawed. Sarah finished her coffee and set the mug down with finality. "So, Marcus," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "when can I expect that $1,000,000 transfer?" The great Marcus Wellington III, heir to a business empire, Harvard MBA, and self-proclaimed master of the universe, could only stare at his secretary, his former secretary, he realized with growing horror, as she dismantled his ego with the same efficiency with which she'd organized his calendar for 3 years. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that he might just have fallen in love with her. The $1,000,000 check cleared on a Thursday morning at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sarah knew the exact moment because she was staring at her bank account balance when the number changed from a modest 5-figure sum to something that looked like a phone number with too many digits. She sat in her new corner office, Director of International Relations, a title Marcus had invented approximately 36 hours after the Great Translation humiliation, and tried to process the surreal reality of her situation. 3 days ago, she'd been fetching coffee and filing papers. Now she had more money in her checking account than some small countries had in their entire GDP. Her computer pinged with an email notification. The sender was listed as M. Wellington III, and the subject line read, "Urgent, Romanian Vineyard Investment Opportunity." Sarah opened it with the kind of morbid curiosity usually reserved for car accidents and reality TV shows. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the Romanian vineyard. After extensive research, I had my team look into it for approximately 45 minutes. I believe this property represents a unique investment opportunity. I would like to discuss a potential partnership. Also, would you like to have dinner? I know an excellent Romanian restaurant." Sincerely, Marcus Wellington III, Chief Executive Officer, Wellington Industries, P.S. I may have been hasty in my previous assessment of your capabilities. Sarah stared at the email for a full minute, then started laughing. The kind of helpless laughter that comes when the universe reveals its sense of humor is more twisted than anyone anticipated. A knock at her office door interrupted her hysteria. "Come in," she called, quickly minimizing the email. Marcus Wellington III entered her office like a man approaching a wild animal that might either flee or attack without warning. He was carrying a coffee tray from the expensive place down the street, the kind that charged $15 for what was essentially caffeine dissolved in pretension. "Sarah," he said, setting the tray on her desk with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. "I brought you coffee. Ethiopian single origin. Light roast, no sugar, splash of cream. The way you like it." Sarah blinked. In 3 years of employment, Marcus had never brought her so much as a glass of water. She wasn't even sure he knew she drank coffee, let alone how she preferred it. "How do you know how I like my coffee?" Marcus had the grace to look embarrassed. "I may have asked Helen in accounting. She mentioned you always order the same thing when we do coffee runs for late meetings." Helen in accounting. Marcus had asked Helen in accounting about Sarah's coffee preferences. Sarah was beginning to suspect she'd fallen into some kind of alternate dimension where her boss displayed actual human behavior. "Thank you," she said cautiously, accepting the cup. "That's thoughtful." "I can be thoughtful," Marcus said quickly, then seemed to realize how defensive that sounded. "I mean, I am thoughtful, regularly. It's one of my many positive qualities." Sarah took a sip of the coffee to hide her smile. It was perfect, which somehow made the whole situation even more surreal. Marcus hovered near her desk, like an anxious teenager trying to work up the courage to ask someone to prom. "So," he said, attempting casual conversation and failing spectacularly, "how are you settling into your new office?" "It's lovely. The view of the city is quite impressive." Sarah gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan. "Thank you for the promotion. You deserved it. You've always deserved it. I just didn't notice before." There was something in his voice that made Sarah look at him more carefully. Marcus Wellington III, heir to a business empire and professional arrogance enthusiast, looked genuinely remorseful. "Marcus," she said gently, "is this about the translation?" "No," he said quickly. "I mean, yes, partially, but not entirely." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger and less intimidating. "Can I sit down?" Sarah gestured to the chair across from her desk. Marcus sat, then immediately stood up again, then sat back down. Sarah had never seen him display anything resembling nervous energy before. "The thing is," Marcus began, then stopped. Started again. "What I mean to say is..." Another pause. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. You gave me $1 million. I think we're even." "No, we're not even. Not remotely." Marcus leaned forward, his steel gray eyes intense. "I treated you terribly for 3 years. I was condescending, dismissive, and completely oblivious to who you actually are. And the worst part is, I did it because I assumed I was better than you." Sarah set down her coffee cup, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "But you're not just better than me," Marcus continued, his words coming faster now. "You're better than anyone I've ever met. You're brilliant, educated, capable, and you put up with my behavior for 3 years without ever making me feel small or stupid, even though you easily could have." "Marcus, I'm not finished." He held up a hand. "When you stood up in that conference room and demolished my entire understanding of that document in 10 minutes, I wasn't just impressed. I was... He struggled for words. "I was attracted to your intelligence, your confidence, the way you looked at me like I was just another person instead of the heir to Wellington Industries." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. That's very flattering, but I know this is inappropriate, Marcus rushed on. I know there are power dynamics and HR policies and about 15 different reasons why this is a terrible idea. But Sarah, I can't stop thinking about you. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility and professional complications. Sarah studied Marcus's face, searching for signs of his usual manipulation or calculated charm. Instead, she saw something she'd never seen before: genuine vulnerability. You want to date your employee, she said finally. I want to date the woman who humiliated me in front of 12 people and made me realize I've been an arrogant ass for my entire adult life. Same woman. Entirely different context. Sarah laughed despite herself. Marcus, this is insane. I know. You're my boss. Technically, yes. There are rules about this sort of thing. There are rules about everything. Some rules are worth breaking. Sarah stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the city spread below them. Manhattan buzzed with its usual chaos. Millions of people pursuing their dreams, making terrible decisions, falling in love with inappropriate people. What exactly are you proposing? She asked without turning around. Dinner, tonight. Somewhere public where you'll feel safe, and I can attempt to convince you that I'm capable of treating you like the remarkable woman you are instead of like office furniture. Sarah turned back to face him. Marcus was still sitting in her chair, but he looked different somehow. Less like the arrogant CEO who'd dismissed her as support staff, and more like a man who'd had his world turned upside down and was trying to figure out which way was up. One dinner, she said. Marcus's face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. One dinner. But I have conditions. Name them. First, we don't discuss work at all. This isn't about Wellington Industries or Vineyard Investments or any business opportunities. Agreed. Second, you pay. Not because I can't afford it. I'm a millionaire now thanks to you. But because you asked, and it's traditional. Of course. Third, and this is non-negotiable. You treat the restaurant staff with respect. I want to see how you behave when you think no one important is watching. Marcus nodded solemnly. Understood. And Marcus? Sarah's voice carried a hint of steel. If you revert to condescending CEO mode for even 30 seconds, I'm leaving. I've spent 3 years being invisible to you. I won't spend one evening being patronized by you. That won't happen. It better not. Marcus stood up, smoothing his tie and attempting to regain some of his usual composure. So, tonight, 7 o'clock? 7:30. And Marcus, don't pick somewhere pretentious. I want to see if you can function in a normal restaurant with normal people. Define normal. Somewhere that doesn't require a reservation made 6 months in advance or a dress code that includes the word formal. Marcus looked genuinely puzzled, as if Sarah had asked him to explain quantum physics in interpretive dance. I may need some help with that. There's a little Italian place on East 82nd Street called Nonna's. Family-owned, excellent food, reasonable prices. Meet me there. Nonna's on East 82nd, Marcus repeated, pulling out his phone to make a note. Should I pick you up? I'll meet you there. This isn't a real date, Marcus. It's a provisional dinner with potential romantic undertones. Provisional dinner with potential romantic undertones, Marcus repeated solemnly. Got it. After Marcus left, Sarah sat back down at her desk and stared at the email he'd sent earlier. Romanian Vineyard Investment Opportunity. She pulled up Google Earth and typed in the coordinates she'd memorized from the property deed. The satellite image showed a sprawling property nestled in the Carpathian foothills, with what appeared to be a stone farmhouse surrounded by orderly rows of grapevines. It looked peaceful, picturesque, and completely at odds with everything she knew about Marcus Wellington III. Her phone buzzed with a text from her college roommate, Jessica. Jess, saw the news about you humiliating your boss. Are you insane or genius? Sarah, both, apparently. Jess, the $1 million is real. Sarah, very real. Just cleared my bank account. Jess, and now he's asking you out? Sarah paused, her fingers hovering over the phone keyboard. How had Jessica heard about that? Sarah, how did you know he asked me out? Jess, lucky guess. Rich guys always want what they can't have. You just became the woman who can't be bought or intimidated. Sarah, I'm having dinner with him tonight. Jess, Sarah, no. Jess, Sarah, yes? Jess, please tell me you're not falling for this. Sarah stared at Jessica's messages, trying to figure out what she was falling for, exactly. Was Marcus genuinely interested in her as a person, or was she just the latest challenge for a man who was used to getting everything he wanted? Her computer chimed with another email, this one from Marcus's personal assistant, his actual assistant, not Sarah anymore. Miss Mitchell, Mr. A. Wellington has asked me to cancel all his meetings for the remainder of the day. He said he needs to prepare for the most important business negotiation of his life. Should I be concerned? Best regards, Patricia Hendricks, personal assistant to Marcus Wellington III. Sarah almost choked on her coffee. Marcus was treating their dinner like a business deal that required strategic planning. She quickly typed back, Patricia, he'll be fine. Just make sure he doesn't bring PowerPoint slides to dinner. Regards, Sarah. At exactly 4:30 p.m., Sarah's office phone rang. Sarah Mitchell speaking. Miss Mitchell, this is James from Wellington's personal shopping service. Mr. Wellington has asked me to assist him in selecting appropriate attire for an informal dinner engagement. He seems quite anxious about the definition of normal restaurant appropriate. Could you provide some guidance? Sarah bit back a laugh. Marcus was having a shopping crisis. James, tell Mr. Wellington that jeans and a nice shirt will be perfect. No tie, no cufflinks, no watches that cost more than a car. He should look like a person, not a Fortune 500 magazine cover. Jeans, James repeated, his tone suggesting Sarah had recommended Marcus wear a clown costume. Are you certain? Positive. Dark jeans, nice shirt, casual jacket if he wants. The goal is to blend in, not to announce his net worth to everyone in the restaurant. I'll convey your recommendations, Miss Mitchell. After hanging up, Sarah sat back in her chair and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Marcus Wellington III was having an existential crisis about jeans, and she was apparently the cause. Her phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Marcus. James gave me your number. Is it inappropriate to text you? I don't want to violate any professional boundaries. Sarah stared at the message. Even his texts were formal. Sarah, it's fine, Marcus. We're having dinner, remember? Marcus, right, dinner. Provisional dinner with potential romantic undertones. Sarah, did you memorize exactly what I said? Marcus, I may have written it down. I didn't want to misinterpret the parameters of our arrangement. Sarah, our arrangement? Marcus, date. I meant date. This is a date. Probably. Is it a date? Sarah found herself smiling despite her better judgment. Marcus Wellington III, master of the business universe, was completely out of his element. Sarah, it's a dinner. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Marcus, right, dinner, at Nana's, East 82nd Street, 7:30. Dark jeans, nice shirt, no tie. Sarah, you really did write all of that down, didn't you? Marcus, I may have created a small PowerPoint presentation titled, Operation Don't Screw This Up. Sarah, please tell me you're joking. Marcus. Sarah. Marcus. Marcus. I deleted it, mostly. At 7 o'clock, Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror, second-guessing her outfit choice. She'd opted for a simple black dress, nice enough for dinner, casual enough for a place like Nona's. Her reflection looked back at her with an expression that clearly asked, "What the hell are you doing?" Good question. Nonna's was exactly what Sarah had promised. A small, family-owned Italian restaurant where the walls were covered with photos of the owner's grandchildren and the smell of garlic and fresh basil filled the air. She arrived at 7:25, and found Marcus already there, sitting at a table near the window. She almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the expensive suit, the perfectly styled hair, the air of untouchable arrogance. The man sitting at the table wore dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His hair looked like he'd run his hands through it nervously, and he was studying the menu with the intense concentration usually reserved for corporate merger documents. "Marcus," she said, approaching the table. He looked up and his face transformed with relief. "Sarah, you came. Did you think I wouldn't?" "I wasn't entirely certain. This is new territory for me." He stood up to pull out her chair, then seemed to second-guess the gesture. "Is this appropriate? The chair thing? I don't want to be presumptuous." Sarah felt something soften in her chest. "It's fine, Marcus. It's polite." As she sat down, she noticed Marcus glance nervously toward the kitchen, where she could see the restaurant owner, a woman in her 60s, directing the controlled chaos of dinner service. "Have you ordered yet?" Sarah asked. "I was waiting for you. I thought it might be rude to order without you." The Marcus Wellington III she knew would have ordered for both of them without consulting her preferences. This Marcus was asking permission to be polite. "What looks good to you?" she asked, opening her menu. "I have no idea," Marcus admitted. "I don't usually eat at places like this." "What kind of places do you usually eat at?" Marcus looked embarrassed. "Places where the servers wear tuxedos and the wine list has vintages older than most of the staff." Sarah studied his face. "When was the last time you ate at a normal restaurant?" "Define normal." "Somewhere that doesn't require reservations, doesn't have a sommelier, and serves portions that are actually meant to feed people instead of being artistic expressions of the chef's emotional journey." Marcus thought for a moment. "I honestly can't remember." Their server approached, a young man who looked like he might be the owner's grandson, with flour on his apron and a genuinely warm smile. "Good evening, folks. Welcome to Nana's. Can I start you with something to drink?" Marcus opened his mouth and Sarah braced herself for him to order something ridiculously expensive or complicated. Instead, he said, "What would you recommend?" The server looked pleased. "Well, Nona just opened a bottle of Chianti from this little vineyard in Tuscany. It's nothing fancy, but it's really good with the food." "That sounds perfect," Marcus said. "For both of us, if that's okay with you, Sarah?" Sarah nodded, surprised. The old Marcus would have launched into a lecture about tannins and terroir. This Marcus was letting someone else make recommendations. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying Marcus's company. Without his usual armor of arrogance and expensive possessions, he was actually interesting. He asked questions about her time at Columbia, listened when she talked about her thesis research, and showed genuine curiosity about her life before Wellington Industries. "So you could have worked anywhere," he said over their shared tiramisu. "Language skills like yours are incredibly valuable. Why did you take a secretary job?" "Personal assistant," Sarah corrected automatically, then laughed. "Sorry, old habit. Honestly, I needed a job immediately after graduation. My mother had been sick, and I'd used most of my savings helping with her medical bills. Wellington Industries offered excellent pay and benefits." "Is your mother all right now?" "She's doing well, thank you. The treatment worked, but it was expensive, even with insurance." Sarah shrugged. "American health care, right?" Marcus looked stricken. "Sarah, if you'd told me about your mother's medical expenses, I could have..." "Could have what? Given your secretary a loan?" "Marcus, you didn't even know I had a master's degree. Why would you have cared about my family situation?" The truth of that hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're right. I wouldn't have cared. I would have seen it as a personal problem that wasn't my responsibility." "And now?" Marcus met her eyes. "Now I'm wondering how many other things about you I missed. How many other people I've worked with for years without bothering to see them as actual human beings." Sarah felt that softening in her chest again. This wasn't the Marcus Wellington III she'd known for 3 years. This was someone else entirely, someone who was genuinely grappling with the realization that his worldview had been fundamentally flawed. "People can change," she said gently. "Can they? Really?" Marcus leaned forward. "Or do they just temporarily modify their behavior when they want something?" It was a fair question, and Sarah didn't have an easy answer. "I guess we'll find out." As they left the restaurant, Marcus turned to thank the owner, Mrs. Rossi, who had come out to check on their table several times during the evening. "Mrs. Rossi, thank you for a wonderful meal. The food was incredible." "Ah, you're very welcome, young man. You bring your beautiful girlfriend back any time." Marcus started to correct her. They weren't dating, this wasn't official, it was complicated. But Sarah touched his arm gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Rossi. We definitely will." Outside the restaurant, they stood on the sidewalk in awkward silence. The evening had gone better than Sarah had expected, which somehow made everything more complicated. "Can I walk you to your subway stop?" Marcus asked. "I was going to take a taxi." "Can I share your taxi?" Sarah considered this. "Are we going in the same direction?" "I have no idea where you live." "Upper West Side." "I live in Tribeca." "That's not the same direction at all." Marcus looked sheepish. "I was hoping to extend the evening a little longer." Despite everything, the professional complications, the power dynamics, the sheer insanity of dating her former boss, Sarah found herself saying, "Okay, you can share my taxi." In the back of the cab, as Manhattan blurred past the windows, Marcus turned to her. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "Thank you for giving me a chance to be someone better than who I was." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd never expected to see in Marcus Wellington III. Genuine humility. "You're welcome," she said softly. As the taxi pulled up to her building, Marcus made no move to follow her out or invite himself up. Instead, he simply said, "Could we do this again? Soon?" Sarah paused with her hand on the door handle. "Marcus, if we're going to keep seeing each other, we need to establish some ground rules." "Name them." "First, we keep this separate from work. Completely. At the office, we maintain professional boundaries." "Agreed." "Second, we take this slowly. I need to know that you're interested in me as a person, not as a conquest or a challenge." "Understood." "And third," Sarah hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "I need to know that this is real for you, that you're not just fascinated by the idea of dating the woman who outsmarted you." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, 3 days ago I thought I understood my place in the world. I thought I understood what mattered and who mattered. You changed all of that in 10 minutes. This isn't about being outsmarted. This is about meeting someone who made me want to be worthy of their respect." Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Okay. Okay? Okay, we can try this. Whatever this is." Marcus's smile was like sunrise. Whatever this is. As Sarah walked into her building, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made either the best or the worst decision of her life. Possibly both. Behind her, Marcus sat in the taxi, watching her disappear into the lobby, and realized he was completely, irrevocably, and terrifyingly in love with a woman who could destroy him with words alone. And for the first time in his privileged life, he thought that might be exactly what he deserved. 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell Wellington, she'd kept her name hyphenated despite Marcus's gentle protests, stood in the penthouse apartment they now shared, staring at the framed Romanian vineyard deed that had started it all. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across the document that had changed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. The transformation had been gradual, but undeniable. Marcus had kept his word about maintaining professional boundaries at work, treating Sarah with the same respect he showed his other executives. But outside the office, He'd pursued her with the single-minded determination he usually reserved for hostile corporate takeovers, except this time his weapons were thoughtfulness, genuine interest in her thoughts, and an almost desperate desire to prove he could be worthy of her affection. Their courtship had been a series of small revelations. Marcus learning that Sarah preferred hole-in-the-wall ethnic restaurants to Michelin-starred establishments. Sarah discovering that beneath his arrogant exterior, Marcus was deeply insecure about whether people liked him for himself or his trust fund. Marcus realizing that Sarah's intelligence wasn't just about languages, she had insights into human nature that left him constantly surprised. Sarah finding herself genuinely charmed by Marcus's efforts to become a better person. The proposal had come 3 months in, not with a flash mob or a billboard or any of the over-the-top gestures Sarah had expected from someone with Marcus's resources. Instead, he'd asked her to marry him while they were assembling IKEA furniture in his apartment, a task he'd never attempted in his privileged life and was failing at spectacularly. "Sarah," he'd said, holding what was supposed to be part of a bookshelf but looked more like abstract art. "I love you. Not because you're brilliant, though you are. Not because you challenge me, though you do. I love you because when I'm with you, I like who I am." She'd said yes while laughing at his attempts to understand pictographic assembly instructions, and somehow that felt exactly right. Now, 6 months later, Sarah was beginning to understand what people meant when they talked about fairy tale endings. Marcus had been true to his word in every way that mattered. He'd started a charitable foundation focused on education access for underprivileged students. He'd implemented employee wellness programs at Wellington Industries. He'd even bought the Romanian vineyard, not as an investment, but as a romantic gesture. "We could spend our honeymoon there," he'd said when presenting her with the property papers. "Learn about winemaking together. Practice your Romanian on people who won't judge my terrible accent." Sarah had been touched by the gesture, even though she suspected Marcus's idea of learning about winemaking would involve hiring expert consultants rather than getting his hands dirty with actual grape stomping. This particular Tuesday morning found Sarah preparing for a major presentation to potential investors interested in Wellington Industries' expansion into Eastern European markets. As the Director of International Relations, she'd become Marcus's secret weapon in navigating complex cultural and linguistic challenges. Their professional partnership had proven as effective as their personal one. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, who was already at the office for an early meeting with the board. "Marcus, good luck with the presentation today. You're going to be brilliant as always. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" "Sarah, let's see if there's anything to celebrate first. But yes, dinner sounds lovely." "Marcus, there will be. I have complete faith in you. Also, I may have arranged a small surprise for after your presentation." Sarah smiled despite herself. Marcus's small surprises had a tendency to be anything but small. Last month, his small surprise had been flying her mother in from Ohio for an impromptu visit. At Wellington Industries, Sarah spent the morning fine-tuning her presentation and reviewing market analysis reports. The potential investors were interested in opportunities in Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, markets where Sarah's language skills and cultural knowledge gave Wellington Industries a significant advantage. She was putting the finishing touches on her slides when her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Mitchell, there's someone here to see you. Derek Blackstone from Blackstone Industries." Sarah's fingers paused over her keyboard. Derek Blackstone was Marcus's biggest competitor, a self-made billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing and took particular pleasure in outmaneuvering old-money rivals like the Wellington family. "Did he say what this was about?" "He mentioned something about a business proposition. Should I tell him you're unavailable?" Sarah considered this. Derek Blackstone didn't make social calls, and he certainly didn't waste time on courtesy visits to other companies' employees. Whatever he wanted, it was likely important. "Send him in." Derek Blackstone entered her office like he owned it, which was probably how he entered every room. He was Marcus's age, but carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every dollar of his wealth through his own efforts. Where Marcus's presence announced itself with expensive clothes and inherited authority, Derek's power was subtler, more dangerous. Ms. Mitchell, he said, extending his hand. Derek Blackstone. Thank you for seeing me. Mr. Blackstone, this is unexpected. What can I do for you? Derek settled into the chair across from her desk with easy grace. I'll get straight to the point. I've been following your work since the infamous translation incident. Quite impressive, the way you handled that situation. Sarah kept her expression neutral. It was just doing my job. Was it? Because from where I sit, it looked like you single-handedly saved Wellington Industries from a very expensive wild goose chase, then transformed their international operations in 6 months. Derek's smile was warm and genuine. That's not just doing your job. That's exceptional talent being severely underutilized. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Blackstone. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly. Derek leaned forward slightly. You're wasted here, Sarah. May I call you Sarah? Ms. Mitchell will be fine. Ms. Mitchell, then, you have skills that could revolutionize international business development. Language abilities, cultural insights, strategic thinking. Wellington Industries is using you as a very expensive translator. I could offer you something more. Sarah felt a familiar prickle of irritation. Such as? Vice President of Global Development at Blackstone Industries. Your own team, unlimited budget for market research, and complete autonomy to develop expansion strategies for emerging markets. Starting salary, $2 million annually, plus performance bonuses. The number hit Sarah like a physical force. $2 million. More than 4 times what she currently made, even with her substantial raise after the translation incident. That's very generous, Mr. Blackstone, but I'm quite happy where I am. Are you? Derek's question was gentle but pointed. Because from my research, you've been here 3.5 years, and until 6 months ago, you were serving coffee to executives who didn't even know your educational background. That doesn't sound like a company that truly values exceptional talent. Sarah's jaw tightened. Things have changed. Yes, they have. You married your boss. The words hung in the air like a slap. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. Excuse me? I'm not judging, Derek said quickly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. Marcus Wellington is lucky to have you, both personally and professionally. But Sarah, Ms. Mitchell, you have to know how that looks to the business world. Brilliant secretary marries millionaire CEO after proving herself indispensable. It's the stuff of romance novels. My relationship with Marcus has nothing to do with my professional capabilities. I know that. You know that. But does everyone else? Derek's voice was kind, but relentless. When you walk into a boardroom, do they see Sarah Mitchell, Eastern European languages expert with revolutionary insights into emerging markets? Or do they see Marcus Wellington's wife, the secretary who got lucky? Sarah wanted to deny it, but she'd seen the looks at corporate events, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, the way some business associates treated her like an accessory rather than an executive. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Blackstone? Join Blackstone Industries. Lead our expansion into Eastern European markets. Show the world what Sarah Mitchell can accomplish when she's not in anyone's shadow. Derek pulled out a business card and placed it on her desk. No strings attached, no office politics, just you, your skills, and the resources to change how American companies approach international development. Sarah stared at the business card without touching it. And Marcus? What about him? This would put Blackstone Industries in direct competition with Wellington's Eastern European initiatives. Ms. Mitchell, we're already in direct competition with Wellington Industries. The only difference is that I'm offering you the chance to be a player, rather than a supporting character. Derek stood up, smoothing his jacket. I don't need an answer today. But I want you to consider something. In 5 years, do you want to be known as the woman who helped Marcus Wellington expand his inherited empire? Or do you want to be known as Sarah Mitchell, the executive who revolutionized international business development? After Derek left, Sarah sat in her office, staring at his business card. $2 million. Her own team. Complete professional autonomy. The chance to prove that her success wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time with the right husband. Her phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Marcus, how did your morning go? Ready for the big presentation? Sarah looked at the message, then at Derek's business card, then back at the message. For the first time since their whirlwind courtship began, she found herself questioning whether she was living her life or simply playing a supporting role in Marcus's. The presentation that afternoon went flawlessly. Sarah's insights into Eastern European markets impressed the investors, and by the end of the meeting, Wellington Industries had secured commitments for a $50 million expansion initiative. As the investors filed out, congratulating Marcus on his company's exceptional international expertise, Sarah noticed how the credit flowed naturally to him. "Wonderful presentation, Sarah," Marcus said as they gathered their materials. "You were brilliant as always." "Thank you. Are you all right? You seem distracted." Sarah forced a smile. "Just tired. It was a long presentation." "Well, you can relax now. I have that surprise I mentioned." Marcus looked like an excited child. "Remember how we talked about taking a trip to the vineyard in Romania? I've arranged everything. 2 weeks, starting next month. We can explore the property, meet with local winemakers, maybe extend your Romanian vocabulary beyond legal terminology." Under normal circumstances, Sarah would have been delighted. The chance to visit Romania, to see the vineyard that had started their unlikely love story, to spend uninterrupted time with Marcus away from the pressures of work. It should have been perfect. Instead, she found herself thinking about Derek Blackstone's offer. $2 million, her own team. The chance to build something that was entirely hers. "That sounds wonderful," she said, and meant it. "I'm looking forward to it." But even as she said it, Derek's business card seemed to burn in her purse like a guilty secret. The guilt followed her home to their penthouse, through dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same little Italian place where they'd had their first date, and into their bedroom that night. Marcus fell asleep easily, one arm draped over her waist, completely trusting and content. Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand why Derek Blackstone's offer felt less like a business proposition and more like a life preserver she hadn't realized she needed. Over the following weeks, Derek's words echoed in her mind with increasing frequency. Do they see Sarah Mitchell, or do they see Marcus Wellington's wife? The question haunted her interactions with clients, colored her perception of colleagues' attitudes, made her hyper-aware of every introduction that mentioned her relationship to Marcus before her professional credentials. She tried to push the thoughts away, focusing on wedding planning and preparations for their Romanian trip. Marcus was increasingly excited about both, bringing her brochures of vineyards they could visit and ideas for their wedding reception. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Sarah found herself caught up in his vision of their future together. But then Derek Blackstone appeared at her favorite coffee shop. It was a Saturday morning, and Sarah had escaped to her usual spot for some alone time with her laptop and a complicated Romanian translation project she'd taken on as a personal challenge. She looked up from her screen to find Derek standing beside her table with his own coffee. "Ms. Mitchell, what a pleasant coincidence." Sarah doubted the coincidence part. "Mr. Blackstone, enjoying the neighborhood?" "Actually, I was hoping to run into you. May I?" He gestured to the empty chair across from her. Sarah wanted to say no, but curiosity won. 5 minutes. Derek sat down and immediately got to business. "Have you considered my offer?" "I haven't made any decisions. But you've been thinking about it." It wasn't a question, and Sarah didn't bother denying it. "I've been wondering," Derek continued, "what it would feel like to walk into a boardroom and have everyone's first thought be about your capabilities rather than your marital status. People respect my work. Do they? Or do they respect Marcus Wellington's wife's work?" Sarah closed her laptop with more force than necessary. "What do you want from me, Mr. Blackstone?" "I want to offer you something Marcus Wellington can't. The chance to succeed or fail entirely on your own merits. Derek's voice was gentle but insistent. Sarah, you're extraordinary. But you'll never know just how extraordinary as long as you're in his shadow. I'm not in anyone's shadow. Aren't you? When was the last time someone asked for your opinion without mentioning that you're married to the CEO? When was the last time you made a decision that wasn't filtered through what Marcus Wellington would think about it? Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach because she couldn't immediately answer those questions. The offer stands, Derek said, standing up. But I won't wait forever. Opportunities like this don't come along often, and I need someone who's ready to take risks. He left a new business card on the table, this one with his personal number written on the back. That evening, Sarah sat in their penthouse, watching Marcus excitedly plan their Romanian itinerary, and realized she felt like she was suffocating. Not because of Marcus, he'd been nothing but supportive and encouraging, but because Derek was right about one thing. She'd become part of Marcus Wellington's story instead of writing her own. Sarah? Marcus looked up from his laptop, where he'd been researching Romanian wine festivals. You're quiet tonight? Everything okay? Just thinking about work stuff. Want to talk about it? I know the Eastern European expansion has been challenging. There it was again, the assumption that her professional concerns were naturally his business, that her challenges were problems he should solve. It's fine, Sarah said. I can handle it. Marcus smiled and went back to his planning. I found this amazing restaurant in Brașov. The reviews say they have the best maishi in Romania. We should definitely try it. Sarah nodded and made appropriate interested sounds, but her mind was elsewhere. In 2 weeks, they would go to Romania together as the happy couple, and she would continue to be Sarah Mitchell Wellington, brilliant translator and devoted wife. She would never know what Sarah Mitchell, independent businesswoman, might have accomplished. The next Monday, Derek Blackstone sent her a package. Inside was a detailed proposal for Blackstone Industries' Eastern European expansion, with her name listed as the proposed Vice President of Global Development. The scope was breathtaking. Market development across 12 countries, a team of 30 specialists, partnerships with local businesses, cultural integration initiatives. It was everything Sarah had dreamed of doing, but had never dared to propose at Wellington Industries. The package also contained a plane ticket to Chicago, where Blackstone Industries was headquartered, and a note. Come see what your future could look like. No obligations, just possibilities. Sarah stared at the ticket for a long time, then carefully placed everything back in the package and shoved it into her desk drawer. But she didn't throw it away. That night, Marcus noticed her distraction during dinner. Sarah, you've been somewhere else all week. What's going on? Sarah looked at him across their dining room table, the man who'd changed his entire world view for her, who'd become a better person because she'd challenged him to grow, who loved her with a sincerity that still sometimes took her breath away. Derek Blackstone offered me a job, she said quietly. Marcus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What? Vice President of Global Development, leading their Eastern European expansion. Marcus set down his fork carefully. When did this happen? A few weeks ago. He came to my office. A few weeks ago. Marcus's voice was very controlled. And you're just telling me now? I wasn't considering it seriously. But now you are. Sarah met his eyes. I don't know. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Marcus pushed his plate away, appetite gone. What did you tell him? That I was happy where I am. Are you? The question hung between them like a challenge. Sarah wanted to say yes immediately, automatically. Instead, she found herself hesitating. I thought I was, she said finally. Marcus nodded slowly, as if her answer had confirmed something he'd been afraid to acknowledge. What's the offer? $2 million annually. My own team. Complete autonomy. And it would put you in direct competition with Wellington Industries. Yes. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his expression was carefully neutral. "You should take it." Sarah blinked. "What?" "You should take the job, Sarah. It's an incredible opportunity." "Marcus." "No, listen to me." Marcus leaned forward, his voice intense. "For 3 years, I treated you like you were invisible because I was too arrogant and self-absorbed to see what was right in front of me. Then you humiliated me in that conference room, and I fell in love with your brilliance. But maybe I fell in love with the idea of having that brilliance as part of my world instead of respecting it as something entirely separate from me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" "Sarah, when people introduce you at business events, what do they say? 'This is Sarah Mitchell Wellington, Marcus's wife, who speaks Romanian.' Not, 'This is Sarah Mitchell, one of the leading experts in Eastern European business development, who happens to be married to Marcus Wellington.'" The accuracy of that observation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You deserve to find out who you can be when you're not defined by your relationship to me," Marcus continued. "And maybe I need to find out who I am when I'm not trying to be worthy of you." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "Marcus, I love you. That hasn't changed. I love you too. But love isn't enough if it means one of us has to diminish themselves to make the relationship work." Marcus's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. "Take the job, Sarah. Go to Chicago. Build something amazing." "What about us?" Marcus squeezed her hand, then gently pulled away. "I don't know, but I know that if you don't take this opportunity, you'll resent it eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but someday you'll wonder what might have been. And I can't live with being the reason you never found out." That night, they lay in bed without touching, each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine her life without Marcus in it. The penthouse, the easy intimacy, the way he brought her coffee in the morning and asked about her day, the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. But she also tried to imagine staying, and realized Derek had been right about one thing. She would always wonder what Sarah Mitchell might have accomplished on her own. The next morning, Marcus was gone when she woke up. In his place was a note on the pillow. "Sarah, I've gone to the office early to start transitioning your projects to other team members. I want you to be free to leave whenever you're ready. The vineyard in Romania is yours, regardless of what happens with us. It's where our story started, and it should belong to you. I'll always love you. Go show the world what Sarah Mitchell can do." Marcus Sarah held the note and cried until she had no tears left. 2 days later, she was on a plane to Chicago. The Blackstone Industries headquarters was everything Derek had promised and more. Modern, efficient, and buzzing with the energy of people who'd built their success from nothing. Derek met her at the airport personally, and over the next 3 days, introduced her to what could be her team, showed her the resources that would be at her disposal, and outlined expansion plans that made her head spin with possibility. "So," Derek said, as they sat in his corner office on her last day in Chicago, "what do you think?" Sarah looked out at the Chicago skyline, then back at Derek. "It's incredible. The scope, the resources, the opportunities. It's everything I've ever wanted to do. But I'd be competing directly with Wellington Industries, with Marcus." Derek leaned back in his chair. "Sarah, business is competitive. That's how markets work. You competing against Wellington Industries isn't personal, it's professional. It feels personal. Only if you let it." Derek's voice was gentle but firm. "Marcus Wellington inherited his position. He's never had to prove himself the way you have. This is your chance to show that you can build something just as successful as what he was given." Sarah thought about Marcus, probably sitting in their penthouse, surrounded by the plans for their Romanian trip that would never happen. "When would you need an answer?" "I need someone in place within the month. The Eastern European markets are heating up, and we can't afford to wait." Sarah nodded. I'll let you know by Friday. That night, alone in her Chicago hotel room, Sarah called Jessica. Tell me I'm not making a terrible mistake, Sarah said without preamble. Are you talking about the job or leaving Marcus? Both. Either. I don't know anymore. Jessica was quiet for a moment. Sarah, do you love him? Yes. Completely. Do you love the person you are when you're with him? Sarah paused. I love who he's helped me become, but I'm not sure that's the same thing. Then you have your answer. On Friday morning, Sarah called Derek Blackstone and accepted his offer. By Friday evening, she was back in New York, packing her belongings while Marcus watched from the doorway. They'd already had the conversation, calm, civilized, and heartbreaking. The divorce papers were drawn up. The financial arrangements were settled. Everything was neat and clean, except for the way they both kept starting to speak and then falling silent. The movers will come for the rest next week, Sarah said, folding the last of her clothes into a suitcase. There's no rush. Take whatever you want. Sarah looked around the penthouse that had been home for 6 months. I don't want any of it. It was never really mine anyway. Marcus flinched. Sarah, I'm sorry. That was unfair. Sarah closed her suitcase and turned to face him. Marcus, I need you to know that this isn't about you not being enough. You're everything I never knew I wanted. But I need to know who I am when I'm not half of a couple. I know, Marcus said quietly. I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure I do. They stood there for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. I should go, Sarah said finally. Marcus nodded and stepped aside to let her pass. At the door, she paused. Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for letting me go. It would have been easier to fight for us, and you chose what was best for me instead. I chose what was best for both of us, Marcus replied, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. Sarah kissed his cheek gently, breathed in the scent of his cologne one last time, and walked away from the best relationship she'd ever had to chase a dream she wasn't even sure she wanted. The elevator doors closed on Marcus's face, and Sarah realized she'd just made either the bravest or the stupidest decision of her life. Possibly both. 2 years later, Sarah Mitchell stood in the boardroom of Blackstone Industries' new European headquarters in Vienna, watching the sunrise paint the Austrian Alps in shades of gold and rose. The view was spectacular, the office was hers, and the quarterly reports spread across the mahogany table showed that her Eastern European division had exceeded all projections by 300%. She should have been triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Exceptional work, as always, Derek Blackstone said, entering the boardroom with his usual confident stride. The Prague expansion is ahead of schedule, the Budapest partnerships are generating massive revenue, and the Romanian operations... He paused, studying her face. You're not celebrating. Sarah turned from the window. Just tired. It's been a long quarter. It's been a long 2 years, Derek observed. Sarah, you've built something incredible here. You're the most successful VP in company history. So why do you look like someone died? Sarah managed a weak smile. Dramatic much? Answer the question. Sarah sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. The truth was, she'd gotten everything she'd dreamed of. Her own team of brilliant specialists, unlimited resources, projects that spanned 12 countries and generated hundreds of millions in revenue. Recognition as one of the most innovative executives in international business development. She'd proven that Sarah Mitchell could succeed entirely on her own merits. The problem was, success felt surprisingly empty when you had no one to share it with. I saw the news about Wellington Industries, Derek said carefully. Marcus sold the company. Sarah's head snapped up. What? You didn't know. It was all over the financial news yesterday. He sold to Hartman Corporation for $2.8 billion. Apparently, he's starting some kind of educational foundation. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus had sold Wellington Industries? The company that had been in his family for 3 generations? Sarah, you okay? She wasn't okay. She hadn't been okay for 2 years, but she'd been too proud to admit it. Too committed to proving her independence to acknowledge that independence meant nothing if it came at the cost of the person who'd helped her become who she was meant to be. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hear congratulations are in order. Vienna headquarters. Romanian operations exceeding projections. Grandmother would be proud. She always said the vineyard would bring good fortune to someone who deserved it." M. Sarah stared at the message, her hands trembling slightly. Marcus still thought about her, still followed her success, still cared enough to reach out after 2 years of silence. "I need to go," she said abruptly, standing up. "Go where? Sarah, we have the board presentation in an hour." "Cancel it. Reschedule. I don't care." Sarah was already gathering her things, her mind racing. "Derek, I need some time off." "How much time?" "I don't know. Maybe forever." Derek stared at her as if she'd announced plans to join a circus. "Sarah, you can't be serious. You're at the pinnacle of your career. You have everything you wanted." "No," Sarah said, pausing at the door. "I have everything I thought I wanted. Turns out, those aren't the same thing." 6 hours later, Sarah was on a plane to Bucharest. The Romanian vineyard looked exactly like the satellite photos she'd studied 2 years ago, except better. Rolling hills covered with neat rows of grapevines, a stone farmhouse that had been lovingly restored, and wine cellars that smelled of oak and time and possibility. Marcus was sitting on the front porch when her taxi pulled up the gravel drive. He looked different, older maybe, but also somehow lighter. Gone were the expensive suits and perfectly styled hair. Instead, he wore jeans and a work shirt, his hands stained with what looked like soil, his hair tousled by the mountain wind. "You came," he said simply, standing up as she approached. "You knew I would. I hoped you would." They stood there for a moment, 2 people who'd loved each other, and walked away from it, trying to figure out how to bridge 2 years of silence and success and loneliness. "Congratulations on Vienna," Marcus said finally. "I've been following your work. It's incredible what you've built." "Thank you. I heard about Wellington Industries. Marcus, why did you sell?" Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since before everything fell apart. "Because I realized something. I inherited that company. I never earned it. It was never really mine." "So what are you doing now?" "This." Marcus gestured at the vineyard around them. "Learning to make wine. Learning to work with my hands. Learning to build something from nothing instead of just managing what someone else created." Sarah looked around at the meticulously maintained property. "You did all this yourself?" "Well, I had help. Turns out there are about a dozen families in the village who've been maintaining this place for decades, hoping someday someone would care about it again. They taught me everything: how to prune vines, when to harvest, how to read the weather patterns." Marcus's voice was full of genuine pride. "Last year's vintage actually won a regional award." "Marcus, that's amazing. It's honest work, hard work, the kind where you earn every success and own every failure." He paused, studying her face. "How does it feel, knowing you built an empire entirely by yourself?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Empty," she said finally. "It feels empty, Marcus. I proved I could succeed on my own, and I did, but I was miserable every day doing it. Why? Because success without someone to share it with isn't success. It's just achievement, and achievement isn't the same thing as happiness." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the wine and earth on his clothes. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. Selling the company, coming here, learning to make wine, none of it was about building a new life. It was about becoming someone worthy of asking you to share one." Sarah's breath caught. "Marcus, I know you left because you needed to prove you could succeed without me. And you did. Spectacularly. But I left everything behind because I needed to prove I could be someone worth coming back to. You were always worth coming back to. No, I wasn't. I was Marcus Wellington III, inheritor of wealth and privilege. But I'm learning to be just Marcus, someone who grows grapes and makes wine and reads poetry in the evenings and thinks about the woman he loves every single day. Sarah felt tears threatening. You read poetry now? Romanian poetry, actually. I thought it might help me understand you better. Turns out Mihai Eminescu writes a lot about love and longing and the kinds of mistakes that haunt you. And what did you learn? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I learned that dragostea adevărată nu se termină niciodată. True love never ends, even when we're stupid enough to walk away from it. Sarah looked at the paper in his hands, then back at his face. Marcus, I walked away from you to prove I could build something on my own. I succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, and every single day, I wished you were there to see it. I was there. Every article about your success, every business award, every mention in the financial press. I was there, Sarah, proud of you and missing you, and hoping someday you'd remember that building something together doesn't make you weak. So what happens now? Marcus unfolded the paper in his hands. It wasn't poetry. It was a business plan. I have a proposal, he said, his voice taking on the professional tone she remembered. Wellington Mitchell Vineyards. Equal partners. You bring your international business expertise and cultural knowledge. I bring the vineyard and 2 years of winemaking experience and a fundamental understanding of Romanian agricultural law that I learned the hard way. Sarah took the document, scanning the carefully prepared projections and market analysis. You want to start a business together? I want to build a life together. The business is just an excuse. Marcus stepped closer. Sarah, I don't want to be your boss or your employee or your subordinate. I want to be your partner in everything. Equal partners building something neither of us could create alone. What about Blackstone Industries? I can't just abandon everything I've built there. So don't abandon it. Transition it to your deputy. She's brilliant and ready for the challenge. Or sell your division and use the capital to fund our expansion. Or keep consulting for them remotely while we build our own empire in Romania. Marcus's voice was intense but patient. Sarah, there are 1,000 solutions. The only question is whether you want to find them with me. Sarah looked around at the vineyard, at the life Marcus had built from nothing, at the man who'd sold his inherited empire to become someone worthy of her love. Equal partners? She asked. Equal partners. In business and in life? In everything. Sarah folded the business plan carefully and looked up at Marcus. I have some conditions. Name them. First, we do this right. Proper legal partnership, clearly defined roles, professional boundaries even though we're personally involved. Agreed. Second, I want to expand beyond wine. Romania has incredible potential for agritourism, cultural exchanges, language education programs. If we're building something together, I want it to be big. Marcus's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. Third, Sarah hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. I need you to understand that I might fail at this. The domestic life thing, the partnership thing. I've spent 2 years proving I could succeed alone, but I've never tried to succeed with someone as an equal. Then we'll learn together, Marcus said simply. Just like we learned how to love each other the first time. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by confidence earned through hard work. The entitlement was gone, replaced by genuine humility. But the intelligence was still there. The drive was still there. And the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world was still there. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Okay, let's build something amazing together. Marcus picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like teenagers. When he set her down, they were both breathless and grinning. "So," Sarah said, looking around at their vineyard, their future, their second chance at happiness. "When do we start?" "How about right now?" Marcus took her hand and led her toward the wine cellars. "I want to show you what we've been making while you were conquering the business world. And then I want to hear every detail about Vienna and Prague and Budapest and all the incredible things you've accomplished." As they walked hand in hand through the vineyard, Sarah realized that success wasn't about proving you could do something alone. It was about finding someone who made you want to build something together that neither of you could have imagined by yourselves. "Marcus," she said as they reached the cellar door. "Yeah? I love you. Not because you changed for me. Not because you're impressive now in different ways. I love you because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be part of something bigger than myself." "I love you too," Marcus replied, squeezing her hand. "Welcome home, partner." The Romanian countryside stretched around them, full of possibility and new beginnings, and the kind of love that gets stronger after being tested. In the distance, church bells were ringing, welcoming the sunset and whatever tomorrow might bring. It was, Sarah thought, the perfect place to start over. Epilogue. 5 years later. The wedding was small and perfect, held in the courtyard of Wellington Mitchell Vineyards on a September evening when the grapes were heavy on the vines and the air smelled of harvest and happiness. Sarah wore her grandmother's wedding dress, and Marcus wore a suit he'd bought in the village. The ceremony was conducted in both English and Romanian, and the reception featured wine they'd made with their own hands. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell gave the toast, raising a glass of their award-winning 2019 vintage. To Sarah and Marcus, who taught us all that the best partnerships are built not on what we can take from each other, but on what we can create together. Sarah looked around at the gathered guests, Derek Blackstone, who'd become an unexpected friend and business advisor, Mrs. Rossi from the Italian restaurant, who'd insisted on catering, the dozen Romanian families who'd become their extended family, Jessica, her college roommate, who'd flown in from Ohio with Sarah's mother. Everyone was laughing and dancing and celebrating the kind of love story that starts with humiliation and grows into something beautiful through the courage to start over. "Any regrets?" Marcus whispered in her ear as they swayed to the music. Sarah looked around at their vineyard, their business, their friends, their life built from equal parts ambition and compromise, and stubborn refusal to settle for anything less than extraordinary. "Only one," she said. "What's that?" Sarah smiled up at her husband, her partner, her equal in all things. "I regret that it took us so long to figure out that the best victories are the ones you share." Marcus spun her around under the Romanian stars, and Sarah realized that sometimes the most important translation isn't from one language to another. It's from what you think you want to, what you actually need. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those turn out to be the same thing.